Hi there. My name is Briana Lawrence. I am an indie author and a pop culture writer. I am currently working as the fandom editor of the Mary Sue. What that means is that all of the geeky, cool stuff I used to watch as a kid that I was told I would grow out of, I never grew out of, and it's actually part of my career now. Not only am I a pop culture writer who writes about anime and video games and stuff, but I've been incorporating it in my own book series. That's where these girls come in. This is Magnifique Noir, which is basically kind of my take on the magical girl genre. So series like Sailor Moon and things like that. It's like my version of those types of stories. Magnifique Noir kind of happened by accident. I know I am someone who talks a lot about the importance of representation as a Black queer woman, and I'm telling a story about Black queer girls. But as important as stuff like that is, it took me a long time to realize that I could actually write those stories. And that's one of the reasons why I always feel like representation is so important, not just for the audience watching, but for future creatives, marginalized creators who might want to tell those stories and think that they can't tell those stories because they don't see themselves in the stories. Magnifique Noir came by complete accident. I was working on something else and I started sketching pictures of these four girls, and my wife was like, you should do something with this. Started taking notes about these girls and who they were, their likes and their dislikes and things like that. And as I was writing about them, I wanted them to be queer. Our leader here, the one in purple, galactic purple, is Ace. Uh, Cosmic Green right here, she's bisexual. Right here, Radical Rainbow, she's lesbian. And right here, the mysterious Prism Pink, who we get to see more of in the second book, is trans. And I just wanted to tell a story about four girls, four Black queer girls, basically going through life, coming into their own, learning how to love themselves and be themselves, but also dealing with the exhaustion and the struggles and the things that Black girls and Black women face in society. And those things are generally in the book represented by the monsters they're fighting. And I also wanted to do a focus on the importance of self care. So they're not just a group of women who fight giant battles. They actually have moments where they sit down and they breathe and they love and they're friends, and they actually comment on how exhausted they are and how hard this is. So, the cool thing about the book, before I get into it, is that it is a visual novel. I actually commissioned artists to do artwork to represent certain scenes. This is a flashback chapter that focuses on a girl named Brie Danvers who will go on to become Cosmic Green, but this is before that. Brie had become accustomed to being labeled as unfriendly or, in this case, a bitch, but it never went any further than that. Hearing the sound of someone running after her caught her completely off guard. She felt the man grab her and force her to turn and face him, his eyes wild and chapped lips curled in pure malice toward her. The seconds he had her on the ground, the back of her head crashing to a puddle on the sidewalk with a wet thud. What the hell are you doing? Get off of me! Maybe, if she screamed loud enough, someone would hear her. There had been people outside before. Someone had to come to her aid, right? Not patient enough to find out, Bree started to struggle against him, but he was faster and had her hands pinned above her head in seconds. Stay still, he growled at her. His voice had a much rougher edge to it, and Bree was about to chalk it up to pure rage, but then something peculiar happened. His teeth shifted into sharp fangs. She'd seen this kind of thing before in television series about teenage wolves, but such bizarre transformations were reserved for the world of fantasy and make believe. Men's eyes didn't glow in a blood red hue in real life. Men also didn't drool like rabid animals, the saliva dripping onto her cheek before it was washed away by the rain. The man, creature, stood up, and with a sickening pop, its hand was detached from its arm to keep her trembling wrist pinned down to the ground. The sight of fresh blood leaking out from where its hand should have been was what did it. Bree screamed, the sound combining with the sudden rush of thunder that rumbled above them. Shut up! Then its other arm stretched forward, its hand clamping around Bree's mouth to muffle her cries. Its skin felt slimy against her lips, and she could taste something sour on her tongue as she kept trying to scream. Bree could finally hear a few people, but they were making the situation worse with their terrified screams as they loudly proclaimed the obvious. There was some kind of ravenous creature attacking a girl in the middle of campus. All the monster had to do was look at them to send them all running, leaving Bree all alone with the looming threat. In that moment, as her attacker looked down at her, many thoughts circulated through Bree's head. The first thought was one she shut down immediately. This never would have happened if she'd been nicer. Maybe she could have smiled more, or told the gentleman her name. She wasn't about to blame herself for the horrible situation she was facing, even when the creature sneered at her and asked, Bet you wish you would have been more agreeable, huh? The second thought she let linger, the danger her mother had warned her about. Granted, she was sure her mother hadn't meant a literal monster would be leering at her right now. The third and final thought was one that made the tears flow down her face. She was about to die, and all she could do was shut her eyes and wait for the inevitable. But the moment never came. Bree slowly opened her eyes when she heard her would-be killer stumble away from her. She was still being pinned down by its detached hand, but the other that had been covering her mouth was now frantically wiping something from its face. It was a fluffy, purple substance, and there was a sweet smell to it that reminded Bree of fresh baked goods. Why can't monsters like you take no for an answer? At most, Bree had hoped for some kind of law enforcement to show up and attempt to fight the creature. Whether or not their bullets would have worked was debatable, but if they were able to get her to safety, that was all that mattered. Instead of men and women in uniform, Bree got a lone girl dressed in purple, white, black, and gray, complete with purple hair that sparkled like its own little galaxy. Was this actually real life right now? The rain had even stopped in favor of letting this girl sparkle. Literally sparkle! Who the hell are. But before the monster could finish, something was thrown at its face again. Were those cupcakes? Was she throwing cupcakes? While the creature was distracted, the young woman walked over to Bree and asked, Are you all right? I. The short answer was no. The long answer was hell no. Bree hoped that her face conveyed her feelings on the situation, because there was no time to explain her absolute fear and confusion. Being attacked by an inhuman creature was one thing, but being saved by a sparkly girl in purple? You fat bitch. The girl in purple smiled sweetly at the monster in front of her. Unrealistic situation or not, Bree had seen people smile like that after having insults hurled at them. This creature was twice the size of the girl in front of her, but that smile made one thing clear. This creature was about to die. Painfully. What was that? The girl asked, watching as her opponent got the last bit of frosting off of its face. There were nasty welts in its skin now due to the sweet acidic frosting. Acidic frosting? What? You heard me. No one told you to interfere. Bree swore that everything was moving in slow motion now. The girl in purple held out her hand, a bright purple energy swirling between her fingers. The power came together and created what was, indeed, a cupcake. The girl giggled and threw it at the monster, the delicious treat smacking it dead in its face for the third time. I don't mean to criticize your technique, but I don't think that's doing anything, Bree said. Was she trying to throw enough cupcakes to melt its face off? That would take a long time, and Bree was sure that her assailant would retaliate eventually. The girl smiled and knelt down beside her. She ran her finger across the detached hand that was keeping Bree pinned to the ground, that sweet smell perfuming the area around them. There was now frosting smeared over Bree's gruesome handcuffs, and soon they melted away into clumps of skin and sugary cream. How did you? I want you to get up and run. What? Get up and run. Now. Bree wished she were brave enough to insist that she could help, but after the night she had no problem with leaving. Behind her, she could hear the girl shouting the words, Cupcake Bomb! Followed by a loud cry of anguish from the monster. There was a loud sound, an explosion of all things, and the ground rumbled from the force of the attack. Bree stopped to look behind her, completely ignoring the girl's demands to get away from the scene. There's a purple cloud of smoke spreading across the sky, and it made the area smell like a bakery first thing in the morning. Did that come from that girl? Bree's anxiousness to leave was giving way to curiosity. Despite all of her movie marathon training where black folks never survived these situations, she was running back to the scene. The remains of her attacker were now scattered about the sidewalk, complete with frosting and colorful sprinkles. The frosting was dissolving the monster as if wiping away any evidence of there being a monster to begin with. And there she stood, her purple rescuer, complete with high heels and sass as she asked, "Who's the fat bitch now?" And then when you get to that part, there is an illustration. So this is actually what the book looks like while you're reading in some parts. The first book kind of serves as their origin story, so you get to find out how the team comes together. You also find out that there was a team before this one 20 years ago. And so this is like the new generation of that team. There is a woman named Golden Blaze who is from the past team that's now training the new team. So it's kind of like a black girl generational story. The second book, the sequel, is basically them finally being able to ask where are these monsters coming from, what's going on, and realizing just how much work being a magical girl is. I have them available on my Etsy shop, which is snowtigra.etsy.com. Um, and if you want to follow more of my writing, you can check me out at Brie Tweets on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to hear me talk about my book series and my writing. And don't forget, you are magical. Bye.